Welcome to Defeat Your Cravings, hosted by Dr. Glenn Livingston, PhD. Dr. Glenn is a clinical psychologist and former multi-million-dollar consultant to the big food industry and uses his experience to help you defeat your cravings. This show will help you to focus on dramatically reducing cravings and leaving the diet mentality behind, so you can more easily and effortlessly achieve your health, fitness, and body composition goals. Please remember, no doctor-patient relationship is created via this show, and you are responsible for confirming any changes to your diet, health, or psychological routines with an appropriately licensed professional before implementing them. Before we get started, if you haven't downloaded the free smartphone app to access dozens of these recordings all in one place, as well as to avail yourself of a confidential community for support, motivation, and assistance, please visit the podcast link on defeatyourcravings.com as soon as possible. And now, here's your host, Dr. Glenn Livingston.
I am here with Anna. Anna, do you prefer to be called Anna or Anna Rose?
Anna's fine.
Okay. Anna has agreed to let me share this time with you so that you can benefit from her experience and strength and hope and wisdom and observations, as well as her trials and tribulations and stumbles and falls. Right, Anna?
That is right.
Okay. Tell me a little bit about your story.
My story with food probably started, the earliest I can remember was probably high school. I'm in my 40s now, if that gives you some perspective. I think my problem started with restricting more so maybe than binging. And I don't really know why that was, but I would just eat maybe like 600 calories a day for like long periods of time. And that, of course, would end in binging. I stopped that pattern, but the restrictive mindset / binging kind of persisted for years, all throughout college. My weight would go up and down.
Could we talk a little bit more about the restrictive mindset? What was it that got you to restrict?
That's the thing. I don't really even know. I try and figure out why I went there, and I really haven't been able to find an answer. I had a very normal childhood. My parents were very healthy. I didn't really feel pressured to be a certain way. Like, I feel like it was just an internal pressure I put on myself to be quote unquote perfect. I guess I do have a perfectionist tendency in myself in a lot of aspects of my life. So maybe that was just sort of a branch of that came out in that way.
Mm-hmm. And then societal pressure to be thin and the power that women get associated with being thin and all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, I just remember looking at 17 magazine and seeing all these girls. And of course, they were super thin. And I just kind of always thought that was the ideal. And so I just put that pressure on myself to do that. Got
it. And how long did that last?
Probably throughout high school and then even in college. I just always had that pressure on myself. I had already established that in my mindset. So it kind of became a pattern that I just lived with. And then maybe like after college, I feel like things kind of settled down, were relatively normal. It was always there. It was just always in the back of my mind. Like, what am I going to eat? When am I going to eat? What shouldn't I eat? What can I eat? Just all these constant thoughts.
What was the price that you paid for that?
The price I paid, just the obsession with food and being constantly worried about it, or what I could eat or couldn't eat, or if I could go out and what was going to be there. I don't have a problem with alcohol at all, but it lessens your inhibition. So I knew if I drank that was going to be a problem later with food, which is funny to say, but it was.
It is for most people.
Yeah, it lessens your control you have over yourself.
Yeah, that's the purpose. That's the purpose of it.
Right. Price paid with socially, even, like now I have kids and a family, and this constant obsession with food prior to this program was just took parts of my life away, spending time with my family. If I was eating bad or binging, I don't want to spend time with anyone. And I just didn't want to be that person anymore.
That's a really helpful description. And I know that a lot of people will identify with that. Now, a lot of people in the eating disorders community would say that making clear and concise rules would enhance that obsession with food, not detract from it. But it sounds like you're saying that when you got involved, your food obsession lessened. Can you explain that? Why would that be the case?
I hear what you're saying, and it kind of sounds like counterintuitive, like having these rules would make me more obsessed, but it was 100% the opposite. I can't believe I never thought of it, but having my rules not put upon me by anyone else. And I knew where my problem areas were, or kind of what my triggers were, I guess, by this point. If I could just set up rules around that, and that was just off limits. I don't do that anymore, or I'm not a person that does that or eats that. Then I didn't have to think about it. I didn't have to agonize over it. I didn't constantly have thoughts, should I, shouldn't I? If I eat that, I know it's going to be a problem later. It was just gone. And then I knew by going through your program, I just knew how to handle it. I knew the resources I had and how I could handle those thoughts.
May I explain why the food obsession lessons, in my opinion, when you do what you just described, when you take an inventory of your trigger foods and behaviors, and you think through very carefully what healthy behavior would be around those foods and behaviors. The reason for that is that, in my humble opinion, or maybe not so humble opinion, food obsession is driven by the necessity to make decisions about food, about hyperpalatable foods usually, which are very tempting and overstimulating. And I think that our culture has it wrong, this idea that you can't draw lines between healthy and unhealthy behavior or good and bad foods. I think that by not drawing lines, you're requiring yourself to make constant decisions all day long about what to do about those foods. And decisions require willpower, and there's only so much willpower that we have. As a result, the mind just kind of goes into a spiral trying to hang on to some semblance of health, but it's not really clear what the decisions are or should be, and people wear themselves down. Whereas when you make very clear and concise boundaries, I'll only ever have chocolate on Saturdays and no more than 2 ounces, then you know what your chocolate decisions are all the rest of the time, and you don't have to think about it. And so that's my understanding of why the torturous food obsession goes away for so many people when you make clear and concise rules and you stick to them. Make sense?
I 100% agree. And it seems so simple. And the fact that I've struggled with this for so many years is mind-boggling to me. But you're right. My problem foods are sweet stuff like cookies, cake, candy, chips, crackers. My first rule in this program was I don't eat that. I eat none of it ever. I don't even have to think about it. If I'm presented with it, or I'm at a Mexican restaurant and they have chips out, in my head, I automatically just know I don't eat that. And then it's just done. You're correct. I don't need to use willpower because I have rules and I committed to them. And
you're not thinking, is this a time that I can have it or can't have it, or how much am I going to have, or how am I going to recover from it, and all that kind of stuff.
Right. What kind of day do I want this to be? Do I want it to go downhill now, or do I want it that's what I would think. It's like, I'm that person that would have 3 potato chips and then blow up my whole day over it. That's just silly. And I don't do it anymore. I see where it will lead. I know I did your program. I did the big why. And also I think what is helpful for me is a little why, in this moment, what's going to happen today if I do this, if I eat this? It's going to ruin my day. It's going to take away my productivity, my want to see anyone. And I don't want that.
So what's it like now that you're not so obsessed with food and you're not restricting? You look fine. I saw you on video just before. You look fine. Have you gained a ton of weight or anything?
Not a ton. I would say I'm in the overweight category.
Not a lot though, right?
No, and it never was bad. It was just this obsession with food that was really the thing. And definitely I gained some weight and lost weight over the years because of my crazy pattern. But yeah, I think I've lost about 17 pounds. I started the intensive in February, and I have a little bit left to lose, but I've heeded your advice of just going slow and not letting my pig talk me into feeling, if I don't lose a pound a week or whatever, that I'm failing and I should go eat, because that's silly.
So making these rules didn't cause you to gain weight. You actually lost 17 pounds.
Yeah.
And they relieved you of the food obsession.
Yeah, it gave me my time back. I want to go out and do things and be social. And before I would hide away. Probably about 5 years ago, for whatever, this just intensified and my restriction lessened and the binging got worse. I don't really know why that was. So I was really at a point of I don't know how to fix this. I didn't know what binge eating was until maybe 5 years ago. I just knew I had this strange behavior. So I actually Googled and I was like, oh, wow, this actually has a name. And I went to an eating disorder clinic, or I signed up for a session, and I talked to the psychologist or was a therapist there. And I spent like an hour, and she just kept asking me about my family and my family history. And I get the reason why, but for me, that just wasn't helpful because I don't know that my problem stems from any of that. And so I didn't need to figure out why I was doing it. Just I knew that I could stop doing it.
Yeah. You could figure out why and keep doing it also.
Right. It wasn't going to help me, like that type of what she was getting at. And I didn't go back, and maybe it would have been helpful. It didn't click with me.
I figured out that the whole binge eating thing for me started when I'd feel lonely or depressed. And then it kind of stemmed from my mother being extraordinarily depressed and anxious about some really horrific things in her life when I was an infant. And so she wasn't connected to me in the way that I really needed love at the time. So it probably always reminded me of that. And what she did, which I was repeating, was feed me chocolate. She fed me chocolate at those times, so I would leave her alone. And I was repeating that for myself, but that insight didn't cure me. It's very interesting. It helped me to forgive my mom, knowing what she was going through. It helped me to forgive myself, but it didn't cure me. There's some very, very practical things that I had to do. And since then, I've discovered that for any behavior, you could fix the behavior without fixing your soul. I mean, it's nice to fix your soul, but why wait 5 years to dig deep and figure it all out when you could just fix the behavior now? And when it actually speeds up figuring out what's going on with your soul in the first place, because you don't have all the food in the way.
Yeah, absolutely. You have this problem that is now under control. And if you wanted to focus on other things, then you have that freedom to do it. When you're so bogged down with eating and focusing on food and that obsession, it's really hard to do much else, to be honest.
Yeah, agreed. What's it like now? You've lost a few pounds. You're giving yourself time to lose the rest, because I imagine there's no doctor telling you it's an emergency or anything like that, right?
No, I'm healthy. I'm a nurse, so I know what not taking care of yourself will do long term, and I don't want that. I have my freedom back. I enjoy spending time with my family, which sounds silly, but before I just always kind of felt like I wanted to hide away. I don't know, just that obsession with food really mentally kind of made me want to retreat.
And it's hard to be with people when you're feeling bloated or sweating, right?
Yeah, I mean, of course not. It's like once I went down that path in a day, you had to look to find me. Like I was just good at being a ghost.
I'll be in the closet sleeping it off. Thank you very much.
Maybe it was my perception. I feel like I was good at hiding it. Only until recently have I really talked to my husband about this problem. And I genuinely think he didn't know. Yeah, I was very adept at hiding my problem and my eating and all that.
How did he react?
He's very supportive of this. I think he was surprised, but he's cool with me doing this. And I feel like he's noticed a difference. I've been happier. I've gotten my freedom back. I want to be the person for my kids that is around and wants to be with them and is supportive and helps them in what they have going on. And I'm happy. I feel joy again. I don't think I realized what a toll this had all taken.
Yeah. So it sounds like the rules were particularly helpful to you, and knowing what to do if you made a mistake was particularly helpful. But what else was it about the process or the coaching program that really worked for you?
I bought the book and I read it, and it immediately made sense in my mind. And even before I got the book, I was waiting for it for a few days, and I found your podcasts and I listened to them, and I was blown away about how much I could connect or just recognize myself in those people in a way that I never had. I tried on my own for a little bit and had more success than I've had in a long time, but I really felt like I needed to do your intensive program. It was just very well structured. I had a great coach. I had communication daily for the first, I can't even remember now, but like weeks of daily check-ins and help with refutations and just the support of your talks that you would give. And so I just had a lot of information. And at times it did seem like I really had to really just give myself a little bit of time to take it all in. But just the structure of it and the support for me and having a real person to talk to, the Q&A calls, even though I wasn't super active on them at the time, I always listened to them, and I still do to this day. I listen to probably like 3 a week. Plus, I have podcast saves that are my favorite because it helps me to hear people that have the same problems that I have or don't even have the same problems that I have, but how they're handling them. And it just is really helpful to hear people talk about their own process and to listen to your sessions and your advice in this pretty structured way, but it just fit into my schedule because it's pretty flexible, and it just ended up being really what I needed.
I just want to mention that we do a lot of follow-up surveys and analyze them intensively to figure out what's working. And among the people who maintain their food sobriety and weight loss long-term, we're talking like a year or more. I forget the exact measure. I think it's a year or more. We have 87% who are listening to a podcast a couple of times a week, if not every day.
Yep.
And that actually surprised me because I thought the more powerful factors would be focusing on their big why and reading that most of the time, most days of the week. I thought it would be doing refutations or having really done the work on refutations and created a summary document and kind of memorized them. And those are all really important. Those also do distinguish successful from unsuccessful people. But the linchpin habit seems to be listening to the podcast. And I guess that's because it's kind of an easy thing you can fit into your schedule. It's a way to bathe yourself in the philosophy, which is really just common sense. I always tell people I don't think I invented anything. I'm just a really good narrator of common sense. I cut through all the mythology and the culture that tells you the opposite so that you can't use your common sense.
Yeah, I agree. All the work that I did with the refutations and stuff that I needed that intensive to do, I have a pretty solid foundation in that. And my pig doesn't pop up too much anymore. And if it does, I can pretty easily shut it down. But just listening to the podcast, I listen on my way to work in the morning. I usually walk at lunch and I'll listen. I can easily fit it into my schedule, and just listening to people, even problems, like I said, they're not necessarily anything, but I always get some sort of gem of wisdom out of something someone says, even if the problem isn't exactly my own. Someone says something really insightful.
These are real people telling real stories, solving real problems. I got to tell you, it kind of matches my experience as a psychologist because people ask me what the best thing about being a psychologist is, and I tell them it's all the stories. First of all, most people don't get to listen to other people on such an intimate level. And I guess the podcast replicates that. But secondly, when someone is talking to you about problem X, like, I can't get along with my wife or something like that, they will inevitably tell you so many stories about their life and all the other problems that they've solved. And they don't know how enriching it is for you to hear all of those stories. And so when you get to hear real people talking about what matters most to them and how they're solving problems in life and what frustrates them most, I think I'm pretty good at coaching people through it. You get enriched in all kinds of ways you don't even realize. So it makes sense.
Yeah, I agree.
And we have another minute or two. Is there anything else that I should have asked you that I didn't, or anything you want to leave my audience with that we didn't talk about?
All I really wanted to say is this is a great program. It has turned my life around completely. If anyone is on the fence about doing it or doing the intensive, I would just highly recommend it. I tried doing it on my own, and like I said, I had some success, but the intensive was so worth it. It gave me so much of my life back.
Was it worth the money and time you had to put into it?
Absolutely. I think about how much time I have left in the day now that I'm not binging or thinking about food all the time, and how much more joy I have in my life. The money is not even equivalent to like how much I got back from it. It's just a kind of a drop in the bucket, the return I got on it. So yeah, that's what I would leave with, honestly, is do it. You got to do it, and you got to commit to it, and you got to want it, but so worth it.
Terrific. Well, thank you so much. I have to run, unfortunately, but it was very nice to talk to you.
You as well. Thank you, Glenn. I really appreciate you.
Tell your husband I said thank you for supporting you.
I will.
I'll talk to you soon.
All right. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
And that brings us to the end of today's broadcast of Defeat Your Cravings, hosted by Dr. Glenn Livingston. If you'd like to find out more about the products and services Dr. Glenn offers to help you dramatically reduce your cravings and stop overeating in 90 days or less, please visit defeatyourcravingscoaching.com. That's defeatyourcravingscoaching.com. Thanks.